Started. Okay, welcome everyone. It looks like we have a pretty good turnout, so that's great. Here we are, already almost through January. So just as a little bit of housekeeping here, just as a reminder, we are recording, so keep your microphones muted unless you're wanting to speak up. These meetings are every third Thursday of the month, always 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon, and this is the same Zoom link every time, so keep that for your records. And just as a reminder, if you know of anyone that wants to be on the distribution list, please let me know, because I do send out reminders about these meetings a week prior and then the morning of. So feel free to send me any contacts that you would like to have on this list. So just as a reminder, the Stroud Center is able to support this work via the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. It is focused in the DRB, so we're getting mostly folks in these meetings from across the Delaware Basin, but there are some folks that are coming into these meetings from outside the DRB. So we're supporting this via the Delaware River Watershed Initiative, as well as Seesaw. We are able to kind of support some folks in Pennsylvania via that method. So here's the DRWI webpage, 4 states, 1 source. Feel free to check that out if you'd like to look into a little more information about that program. Certainly what we're doing is just one small component of that program. Consortium for Scientific Assistance to Watersheds, that's available for Stroud to provide support to groups across Pennsylvania. So keep that in mind if you are a group that is not specifically working in the DRWI, but you are Pennsylvania. Stroud can provide support via that method as well. So goals for these meetings, it's just a time for us to check in and talk about current issues and discuss anything that anyone wants to discuss. We have these presentations, we provide updates. We have 2 presentations today. They're kind of technology oriented, one on Monitor My Watershed and one on EnviroDIY technology. So here's our kind of core group of folks that are supporting the day-to-day efforts: me, Rachel Johnson, Krista Reeves, and Shannon Hicks. And then Carol Armstrong and George Seeds are Master Watershed Stewards supporting the effort. So as a reminder, these meetings are all recorded, and those recordings are available here, along with a lot of other resources. So feel free to check that out. You can access via this direct link, or you can just go to Wiki Watershed and there's a tab there. So the primary goal for our EnviroDIY effort in the Delaware River Basin is to support station owners. And then secondarily, Stroud Center is doing data analysis and developing tools to help users better understand the data and apply the data. So today's agenda, we have the introduction. I'm going to get into some Stroud updates here. And then, as I mentioned, we've got the upgrades to Monitor My Watershed presentation. And then Shannon is going to talk about technology updates. So getting into the Stroud updates here, just a kudos to Rachel Johnson, Steve Mohap, and Shannon Hicks, who have been out doing a lot of field support, doing lots of these cell board and mayfly replacements. And they have, very recently, they've just been out for long field days and have visited over 50 sites just recently. So well done by those folks. Request to all you folks and anyone you might know of that is interested in writing a EnviroDIY blog post. 3 main categories for those are technology, categorized as tips and pointers within here. Organizational, meaning kind of broad intentions and purposes of monitoring. And then sort of just updates and news. So if you have ideas for a blog, if you've got a new program going, or if you're doing something interesting technologically, please feel free to reach out to me, and we can help you with writing a blog, help with editing, whatever. But we're trying to continue our posting of helpful blogs. So please consider that and reach out if you'd like to participate. Monitor My Watershed, as most folks I think know by now, we are transitioning to Amazon Web Services, AWS. This is primarily being done by Limnotech. Anthony Oftenkamp there is the lead. Earlier in January, a lot of folks had to go out and reboot stations in order for some of that transition to fully take effect. If there's any, I think we're pretty much set at that level, but if you have questions about that, certainly, or if there's something wacky going on, certainly be in touch, but rebooting stations is always a good first kind of step if you're having problems to do. Just like your computer, rebooting a station can often kind of work out bugs. Also, regarding updates happening around all of this stuff, all of this transition to AWS, there are updates being posted. So you can get those updates if you are an EnviroDIY.org member, or if you have an account. So I encourage you, if you don't have an account already, to just go in there and register. And after you register, you can sign up for daily or weekly email updates. And they will kind of key you into all of the recent stuff going on the forum, as well as blogs. It's free and just kind of a normal email, and setting up a password and such. So please do that if you haven't already. As most folks probably have identified, there's a new look to Monitor My Watershed, particularly the time series spot where you look at historical data, where you can visualize historical data. That is now the time series visualization, as opposed to it was called time series analyst. I'm going to do a presentation a little later that is going to talk a little more specifically about this. Regarding registering on EnviroDIY, if you register, you will then get these updates. In particular, you can check this Monitor My Watershed forum. Another thing that we would like folks to do, and I'm going to actually ask folks to just fill out the poll here a little bit later as a group for everyone that has completed this, but we're just encouraging folks to take this survey to give us feedback on Monitor My Watershed. So we're making sure to get the voices of the users into the upcoming design goals. It's just a simple Google survey. And then just going back to this is the recent work that a lot of the recent work that Rachel and Steve and Shannon have been doing, replacing these old digi boards with a new Shannon invented board. And this seems to be taking care of the connectivity issues. Most stations are now reliably online. So if you're having connectivity issues, be in touch, and it may just be a case in which your cell board is no longer working and needs to be replaced, and Stroud Center is able to assist on that. Okay, just as a reminder to go to these sites, this site, click here to get to this site to access all kinds of different EnviroDIY in the DRB materials, recordings of workshops, these meetings, conferences, etc. And lastly, I think this is lastly, we have a EnviroDIY build workshop scheduled for March 23rd to 24th. This is the first, right now is the first we have publicly announced this. But it does look like we're going to go forward with this. So if you would like to be added to this early access list for attending this workshop, just be in touch with me and we can put you to the list, and that should ensure that you're able to attend. And again, that workshop is it's kind of a standardized workshop at this point, in which you would purchase a monitoring kit and a sensor directly from the monitoring kit from Stroud, a sensor directly from the manufacturer, and you would be walked through the process of assembling the station, coding the mayfly board, and trained on installation. And when you leave the workshop, you have a functional station that you can then go and install. Okay. Any questions before we move on to the first presentation?
I'm sorry, this is Carol. Would you be able to put the link for the survey on Monitor into the chat?
Yes, and we will do that. We're going to do that here in a couple of minutes, Carol. Rachel will post it in, and we'll actually take a couple minutes and allow folks to just complete the survey right now, so that we make sure that we get as many people to complete it as possible. So I'm going to roll through here, because I want to give Shannon plenty of time to talk and receive questions. So I'm guessing there's going to be quite a few questions for Shannon. So I will share again. Exit this presentation and go into this presentation. Okay, so this is a quick overview of upgrades that have happened and are going to be happening in Monitor My Watershed, basically in 2022. Okay, so just an overview of the groups involved in this. Primarily, it is Limnotech and the Stroud Center who are collaborating to pretty much develop the direction of this tool. Limnotech, that's the engineering. They're managing the software and putting it all together. As I mentioned earlier, Anthony Oftenkamp is the lead on this. Stroud Center is obviously, I guess, promoting and facilitating the adoption of this tool in the community, and also just kind of working with Limnotech to manage the overall direction and functionality of the system. Okay, so just a little bit on GitHub, and this is going to be more applicable to some more of the technology-oriented folks, but just a little bit of a tutorial on GitHub, and very, very general. But essentially, this is where all of the kind of technical to-dos are going to be documented for Monitor My Watershed, among a lot of other things. There's a lot of code posted there and stuff like that for EnviroDIY, but specifically with Monitor is what I'm going to talk about here. Two key terms, milestones and releases, are where you're going to kind of have some of the summarized information and some of the timelines within this GitHub section related to Monitor My Watershed. Some of the fixes that are going to be made, it would ideally be kind of sooner than later, but an important thing to keep in mind is that this is a real kind of major transition to stabilize the foundation of the entire data portal. So it sort of is going, on this, you have to do A before you do B. So right now there's a lot of upgrades happening in terms of software that are kind of solidifying the foundation of the whole portal. And this is really intended to just allow for long-term sustainability. This is really kind of still in kind of a pilot phase right now. And so the idea here with Limnotech getting involved is that it's laying a solid foundation for the future. So here are some main links for GitHub. This ODM2/ODM2 data sharing portal is the main one I want to talk about. This is essentially means the Monitor My Watershed. So I'm going to escape from this for a second, and I'm going to go to that actual site here. Oh, actually, hold on. I need to open up my, oh, now it's not letting me access. Well, sorry about that. Let me just click into this. Oh, wait, no, here it is. Sorry. Okay, so here we are at this link. This is GitHub, how it looks. So notice here, this address up here. And then I'm on this tab here, code. And then in this tab, you look down here for releases, and then you can click in here to releases, and it gives you kind of like, this is just updates on things that have been fixed within the system. Okay, and these are different fixes that have happened over time. So you can see here, this is when they were updating Monitor with LeafPack. Here's a long list of items related to kind of, again, foundational website design and stuff like that. And then here's some additional ones. So these are the most recent ones. And then if you click on issues here, that gives you the actual issues that are being addressed that have been kind of logged in here. You can see here's one that I added recently. And then within that, you can see here this milestones tab here. So if you click on that, you have these current milestones, and you can see here this release 0.13, the due date is February 28th, 2022. So if we click into that, you can see that all of these different items are going to be fixed by the end of February. Okay, so a lot of these have to do with underlying code and software and such, but you can see that there's other things like some of the issues that have surrounded some of the file uploads and limitations on size for uploading files. Stuff like that are in there. Some things with relation to how data are displayed in Monitor My Watershed. But you can click into these individually for even more information. Okay. So keep that in mind if you're interested in a little more information about what's going on with the progress of Monitor My Watershed. You can also click in here under milestones into the closed things, again, to see all of the different milestones that have been met. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation and skip. Oh, and then actually just noting here, ODM stands for Observations Data Model. Okay, so and there's a website for the ODM2 version 2, which you can go to if you want to get really detailed with seeing what's going on there. Okay, this is all just what I went through in real time. Okay, now transition to Amazon Web Services. This is something that is recently happening. Obviously, a lot of what's going on here is replacing old code with more stable and faster. ODM2 software stack is being updated. The software stack is all the software applications that work together and need regular updating. So there's just a lot of foundational work in that way. So it is now time to all of us take the survey. So Rachel, if you could post in one of those links, maybe just post this direct one. They can just go direct.
I've just posted the direct link.
All right, wonderful. So why don't we take a couple minutes for everyone to just click in there, click that link, and just go in and fill out that survey. And why don't we, I think it shouldn't take more than a couple minutes. So everyone just please click in there and we'll do maybe a minute or two, see how folks are doing with completing it.
So Dave, suppose you've already completed it. Do you need to do it again?
No, if you've already completed it, then thank you, Rob. That was Rob Tuttle, right?
That was, yes.
Man, I know your voice, Rob. I didn't even look. Yeah, so if you've already done it, then just hang tight.
I also just posted the link to the blog that describes the transition to Amazon Web Services, if you're
Good.
interested in reading that.
Good, excellent, Rachel. Okay, whenever folks are finished, if they could just maybe write in the chat, that would be great. Just whenever folks start finishing the survey. And if anyone who has taken the survey has any questions or things they'd like to kind of bring up right now, we could do that.
So Dave, this is Rob again. Is there any planned, we have a lot of suggestions. Is there any planning to go over and kind of vet them and decide what's in or out, or
Well,
what the
I
priority
think,
might be?
yeah, I think the prioritization is pretty much being decided by Limnotech and probably a few of the folks at Stroud who are actively involved in the sort of that process. There's a lot of kind of needing to do this before you can do this. So I think the prioritization is really related to that sort of idea. So yeah, I mean, and I think it's also somewhat dependent just on funding. But I think the idea is that these changes are all to be made within 2022. But I think the importance of it, I think prioritization is going to happen if there's a clear need. So, there's certain functionalities that I think are really important for just people who are trying to view and use data. So I think those types of inputs are going to be important. A lot of the current sort of changes in monitor that may be a little bit different and not as functional as the previous TSA are documented already. So before posting anything in GitHub, I would definitely, check if the issue has already been listed. So, and you can do that under that issues tab. All you do is just, there's a clear box where you can just type in certain words to search. And so I would just check those, and you could certainly check those milestones and search within there and see, okay, I want to look at, this zoom option on the y-axis. Has that been addressed yet? And if it hasn't been if it's been addressed but hasn't been fully addressed according to like what you think is necessary, then you can certainly add on to existing issues within there.
Cool. That's with the GitHub access. Like I'm interested in file, card data file uploading. And so it seems like what you presented today, there's a way to kind of track that. So that's
yeah,
great.
and that issue in itself, Rob, certainly go in and check how they've documented it. But that really is something that is, at least according to what I'm seeing, in those milestones, that is something that I think is going to be updated by the end of February.
Okay,
Certainly feel free to go in there and check, what they're saying is going to be updated and add to it if you have any suggestions. Jacqueline, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
I'm just looking at this survey here, and because I'm not an owner, because I'm not doing a lot of the technical stuff, that's Jim Not having a lot of success with filling this out in a way that I think would be helpful.
Okay.
And just looking at all the details here. So do you have, for example, I mean, I think I put this in the chat. What is API for interoperability?
Okay.
APIs. Yeah, things like technical terms that I just don't have any.
Yeah, and that's
thoughts
fair,
now.
Jacqueline. And it may make sense at some point for us to put another survey together specifically for users.
How you doing?
What's that, Jim?
Good, good. What's
Uh-oh,
happening, huh?
mute. All right. So, okay, we better get back to it here so that if Shannon has enough time, and I think I am almost through this here. Let's see here. Okay, yes, just mentioning, you know, we've transitioned from the TSA to the TSV. This is a direct quote from GitHub from Anthony. Although this presently reduces the features available for interactive visualization of time series data, it opens the door to new features that we will develop over the next year. TSV will also be more performant and reliable than TSA. Okay, so and you can see here, this is right within that ODM to data sharing portal section of GitHub. Okay, so I already went through this. So this was the milestones that were for February. And again, feel free to go through and check those out, tune yourself in to the day-to-day of Monitor My Watershed upgrading. And noting here that, you know, after February, a lot of these TSV upgrades will be made. So final thoughts, please pass on the survey to others that we just did if you'd like. And also just feel free to be in touch with us about Monitor My Watershed. And, you know, certainly, again, get an account on EnviroDIY so that you can get updates and kind of tune into the activity there. And feel free to you know, get to know GitHub if you're really wanting to get involved and understand some of the more technical process-based issues. Okay, so that concludes that little presentation, and we are right at 3. So I think we're on track for Shannon's 15 to 20-minute presentation, and then have 10 or so minutes at the end to discuss. So Shannon, if you are ready, feel free to share and begin your presentation.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Dave. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been on a lot of these Thursday calls, but it's been, I think, a little while since I've presented anything because we really didn't have that much reliable info that we could share, that we felt like that we could actually guarantee to everybody, because it's just been a really hard couple of years in terms of hardware and production, and which is stuff I'm going to get into of why it's been an uphill battle to address all of the hardware issues that we've had. But my name is Shannon Hicks. I'm the research engineer at Stroud. I've been here for almost 12 years. I'm an electrical engineer, which was what I studied a long time ago. And I've spent the last 20 years working on environmental monitoring hardware and developing circuitry and working with instrumentation and sensors for all sorts of scientific and environmental monitoring. So I've been applying what I know to stream science with these homemade data loggers for about 7 years or 8 years with these homemade loggers. Before that, we were using a lot of commercial off-the-shelf stuff. If I share my screen now, there we go. So, Dave, is that showing up right? It's been a while since I've shared something.
Looks great, Shannon.
All right. So most of you have probably seen, either been out to the field to see one of these, or you're at least associated with the groups who are using these, that the station there on the left is our typical EnviroDIY stream monitoring station. It is a plastic waterproof box, and inside that box is some circuitry, and everything that's inside that box is developed by us at Stroud for the EnviroDIY project. But then all of the sensors, like the red cable or the black cable, if you've got a newer sensor, or the turbidity sensor has a black cable, those sensors are developed by other companies like Meter Group or Campbell Scientific or other companies. So I'm not going to be talking about what goes in the water today. I'm just going to be talking about the stuff that goes inside the waterproof box. So that's what the typical station looks like. If you've never looked inside one, this is what they look like. There's usually a green circuit board with a battery, and then a bunch of cables that come from the various sensors, and also a cable from the solar panel. The circuit board that has been in all of the loggers now since 2016 was the Stroud EnviroDIY Mayfly data logger. We started with a version 0.1 to 0.2, and then 0.3. 0.3 was the first one we really started to release in large numbers in 2016. And we produced thousands of these over the last 5 years. And starting in about early 2020, even before the pandemic started, we were hearing that some of the components on the circuit board were being discontinued or were not in production right now. And because we have to buy hundreds or even thousands of some of these parts, if they're no longer available, then that starts to be a problem when it comes time to build another production run of these devices. So it, starting like 2 years ago, I started redesigning this board and thinking of ways that we could incorporate new circuitry and redesigning it so that other parts would be available. The problem is, if you're not aware, there's been a semiconductor shortage for about 2 years now for just about all electronic devices and circuitry in cars. That's why you can't find a lot of cars at car dealers right now. It's not really to do with the pandemic. It's because the circuitry and the chips that go on the boards are not available from the factories that make the chips that then get turned into larger devices. And that has trickled down into just about every electronic semiconductor, and all those little black and yellow and white chips that you see on the board are getting very rare and hard to find for certain parts. And so there was a lot of existing stuff for a couple of years in factories and warehouses and stuff that was left over that had been built years ago. But as that existing inventory got bought up and used up, they weren't able to produce more fast enough. So there's been this giant shortage of most of the parts that we use. So every couple of months, when the design that I had would have to be redesigned again, just to be able to use the new parts. Because by the time we would send the design to the manufacturer, they would say, sorry, 2 or 3 of these things are no longer there. And then I had to redesign major portions of the board using those parts. So last year in 2021 alone, I went through 5 major redesigns of the board in a 6-month period, just trying to find chips that were available when it came time to manufacture them. So starting in the fall last year, around October, we released this, which is the Mayfly 1.0. And that is, it's the same overall size as the original Mayfly, but if you notice, the corners are rounded rather than squared off or at 45-degree angles there. So it looks a little different if you happen to go out and look in the box, but otherwise it's still just a green board that has kind of the overall idea. So some of you may not even notice if you go out to the field and you open the box, you're like, yep, it's a green circuit board, but they are different. And probably, I don't know, maybe half the components on this board are not in the original design because I had to use newer parts. But it also gave us the opportunity to add a bunch of new features while I was redesigning it. This is just a slide from our website where we talk about a lot of things, but I just want to mention a couple of key points to this. Is that it uses a USB-C jack. So if you are somebody who ever goes out to reprogram your station, or you're going to try to build your own, you're going to need a different cable. We've upgraded to a USB-C jack on these. So that's one of the big changes. The other thing that we've added is a digital humidity and temperature sensor. So in the middle of the board, there's a tiny little chip that's about I think it's about 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. It's very, very tiny, but that is a humidity sensor. And there's also an onboard analog light sensor. So there's a sensor that can just tell whether or not, if it's in full sunshine, it's a full scale reading. If it's in a room, it's probably around 30 to 40%. And if it's in a dark room or in the box with the lid closed, it'll be 0. So the reason we've added these sensors is that we've had cases where maybe a data logger has been, the case has been left open, or maybe the box gets knocked over and somehow the lid pops open or something like that, where now we haven't edited the code just yet, but very soon when we go back and reprogram the stations in Monitor My Watershed, you've got your sensor readings, like what's going on in the water, maybe your battery voltage and your cell phone signal strength. We are also going to add the parameters of the board humidity reading and the board light readings. So if for some reason the lid is open on your case and you walk home and you leave and then you go back to the website and you see that normally the internal light levels in your enclosure should be 0. If it's not, then you know that the lid has been left open. And likewise, if the humidity sensor gets too high, then you know maybe there's water in the box, there's a leak, or for some reason there's a humidity issue going on. So we've incorporated that in some of our own stations here, and it's been really nice to see that data, mainly because there was a box that somebody was giving a tour of the Stroud Center once, and they opened the lid of the the plastic box to give a tour and explain to people what it looks like inside, but then they walked away with the tour group, left the case open, and it rained the next day and shorted out the board. So now we'll be able to look at a website and tell if a box is open or not. So that's just a fun little feature, and it can also be used in our workshops and other times that you want to know what's going on. I actually put one of these in my refrigerator and logged the light and humidity readings every 5 seconds for a couple of days, and then downloaded it and put it in a graph, and you could actually see how often I open the fridge, because the light comes on and you get a peak of reading, and you actually let a lot of humid air in every time you open the door. So anyway, it's kind of fun to do that, but it's a kind of proof of concept that you can record light and humidity right on board the Mayfly in addition to that. So anyway, those are some of the fun features that we've got with the new Mayfly. But the bigger issue that I think a lot of people here are probably wondering about is what's going on with the cell phone board. So for the last several years, we've been using, back at the very beginning of this project, I think most of you probably had a 2G cellular board, which is like, the old school cell phone stuff from 6, 7, 8 years ago. And those cell phone towers all got upgraded from 2G to 3G several years ago. I think they did it like around New Year's one year. So all of a sudden one day, like most of the DRWI stations all dropped offline because AT&T turned off all of their 2G cell phone towers in the entire area. So we scrambled really quickly to run out and reprogram them with new 4G LTE cellular data boards so that we could get everybody back online. So everyone's been using these boards for the last like maybe 2.5 years. I think it was in 2019 actually when we started using these. So that worked for a little while, except that then we found that those little blue boards that are on the top, they're made by a company called Digi, and those boards cost about $90. Well, now they're 90. They used to be 70, then they went to 80, and now they're 90. But we found that they tend to fail after about a year of being out in the field. And we sent them back to the manufacturer, but of course, at that point, they were out of warranty. So we had to keep paying $90 every time one of these things broke. But the bigger issue was that there was an awful lot of downtime where people were saying, hey, my station's offline, I've changed the battery, it's still there, what's going on? So we were having to replace way too many boards and too many people were losing data. And we couldn't even buy new ones because sometime in 2020, they were out of stock because the company wants to redesign them, but they are having the same redesign part shortage issue that we were, that they can't even find the parts that they need to redesign their board to offer them. So they've said sometime in late 2022, which is later this year, they're going to have a few hundred to maybe 1,000 or so for the entire world to buy. So they're going to be very hard to find until sometime in 2023. So there's no way that we were ever going to wait for them to resolve those issues. So I just decided to design our own cell board for us, and it's called the EnviroDIY LTEB, and you can see it there on the Mayfly plugged in. The nice thing about this is it doesn't require the little B adapter. So the B adapter was this green board that went in between the Mayfly and the blue board, and I'm just explaining this so you've at least heard it. You don't need to know any of this info because you don't need to do these upgrades. But for those of you who have ever gone out and looked in your station in the last year or two, it looked like the one on the left. It had a blue board with that silver metal thing on it, and then a little socket where you plug in the SIM card, which is what gives you your connection to the cell network. Well, now we have a small green board that plugs directly onto the Mayfly. It doesn't need that little red and white, the red and black battery jumper cable that's kind of sticking up in that upper left-hand picture. We don't need that little red and black cable anymore. So the whole thing is smaller and fits on the board easier. And it only costs $50, so it's cheaper. So it's if they do happen to fail, it's not going to cost us quite as much. Plus, we're in charge of the production of them, and there's no shortage in the foreseeable future with these. So it's an unlimited supply as far as we can tell. So it's going to be a much nicer way to do things. The one thing you have to look out for is that if you notice the antenna jack, the antenna is the little black cable that's connected to there. The antenna is connected to the, if the way the Mayfly is there, the bottom of, there's two little sockets, these little button shaped gold sockets. It's on the bottom one on the board on the left, and it's on the top one on the board on the right. If you read the labeling next to them, one of them said that they say cell for cellular. The other one says GPS, because if you want to, you can actually put a GPS antenna on there, and then your Mayfly knows where it is as it goes around. But if your antenna happens to pop off, you'll just read the words on the board and plug it back into where it says cell. Don't find a picture of your station from 2 years ago and put the connector where it used to be, because it's kind of, they've kind of had to swap, but it just has to do with the type of chip. And the SIM card that goes into this board on the right hand side there, it's on the bottom of the board. You can't really, but before you plugged it in, that's where the card goes. So if anyone occasionally, sometimes your card may have to be reinitialized, but like we may actually have to get you to activate a new card and swap them out or something. So if for some reason you end up swapping out SIM cards, there is a socket on the cell board. It's just on the bottom and you can't see it in that photo. But anyway, that's the exciting news, is that we've got hundreds of these now, so that there's no shortage of getting the boards back online with the LTE cellular service. And it also works with more carriers than it used to with the previous one. So we have even bigger coverage than we used to get. They also use a lot less battery power. They make the transmission in about 15 seconds, whereas the other ones took almost a minute to send the data. So, and they used about a quarter of the power. So if you're using a quarter of the power for like a quarter of the time that you used to use, you're now making a quarter times a quarter. So that's a pretty good power savings in terms of battery life. So we're seeing that the stations are much happier and the batteries are happier with this new cell board. So the other thing that we're getting ready to release are these little LED boards. There's an OLED, which is an organic LED, but it's a tiny little display that plugs into the Mayfly with this little socket and the extra little pins down there that most people don't have anything plugged into that area of the Mayfly. So it's a tiny little screen that can be turned on, either left on all the time, but if you do that, it shortens the life of the screen. It only has a couple thousand hours where it can be constantly on. So it's going to be an on-demand kind of thing. So we're not implementing this just yet, but the idea is, and it works just fine in testing, is that you would go out and there's three little small push buttons next to the screen. There's an OK and an up and a down, and which can also be yes and no. So the idea is that you go out and push the like OK button or the wake up button on the bottom, and the board would wake up and show you your battery voltage and let you scroll through with the up and down button the list of sensor readings, like the most recent readings. So you could see if, you could go out and actually read the turbidity reading on the screen, go clean it with a brush, and then go back and read it again and know right there in the field that you've cleaned your sensor without having to get your phone out and wait for the next reading on the internet. Or if you just, a lot of times, your station is offline and we say, well, go visit the station and check your battery. Well, you'll be able to go and see the battery voltage on the screen without having the station being online. So anyways, go out with the troubleshooting a lot. So we're hoping to release that here just in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be able to, people can buy those if they want to write the code themselves, but soon we'll be implementing the code to do this in all the stations that are out there. So we are basically adding the code for reading the humidity and light levels and also talking to the screen. So it's a little bit of testing. We just want to make sure before we roll out the code that operates this and takes all the readings from your sensors is going to operate correctly, because we don't want to add new features and then find that your station dies too easily, or it locks up, or somehow interferes with your sensor readings, because the water quality sensors is the highest priority data that we have, and this other stuff are just kind of fun things to make life a little easier for us, but we definitely don't want to ruin your data in the process. So we want to make sure that the code is working 100% before we roll that out. It's also a cold time of year to be standing out there with a laptop and plugging cards in and updating things. So we try to do is the minimal amount of field work that we can with a lot of sensitive hardware while we're out there. And then a couple other quick things. If you happen to see some of our new items in the shop, I want to explain what they are. I've invented this new thing. It's a Wi-Fi B, so it's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth both. If you didn't have cell phone coverage, or you were building another device and you just wanted to be able to talk to your Mayfly, either with your phone, you can write an app that will talk to it, or your phone can use a Wi-Fi connection to set the clock or send data or something like that. So that's actually how I did the station that was in my refrigerator, was sending the data through one of these to my router, which was then sending the data to monitor my watershed. So it's an easier way, so you don't have to have a cell phone plan if you're using this somewhere where you've got Wi-Fi. So that's something that we're offering now. We still have the little Grove stereo jacks that you use on the water CTD sensors, but we've redesigned the 6 screw terminal jack to make it a little easier to use with bigger screws, so that before you had to have super tiny screwdrivers. If any of you have ever used the screw terminals with the turbidity sensor cables, you'll know that you had to have a super tiny little screwdriver. So I used some bigger ones to make it a little easier. And there's some other features on there that's cool. So that's a new thing that we have. And then the other exciting thing is it's an RS-485 Modbus adapter. And so just for the technical people in the room, there's a certain type of protocol that certain sensors use. And we haven't been able to talk to those sensors because we didn't have a handy adapter that would work until now. So it plugs into the Mayfly like that, and you can use something like, there's a RS-485 turbidity sensor from a company called Yosemite, and it has a motorized wiper on the bottom. And so for those of you who hate going out and scrubbing the algae off of your turbidity sensor really often, this is an option that you might be able to use. It costs a little bit less than the Campbell sensors you've been using, and it's just really handy for automating that cleaning process. It's a little bit bigger sensor and it uses a bit more power, so you've got to have a bigger battery and all that kind of fun stuff. But in general, it could be handy in places where that you don't get to very often, or sensors that foul very frequently. So this new adapter is going to allow us to plug in a large variety of sensors that we haven't been able to just yet. So you can be looking for more information from us on that in the next few months. And along the same lines, this is not our product, but something I would mention, since it's about turbidity, that people have been asking for a little while now about the turbidity options, because Campbell Scientific has kind of the same issue that we have. They could not make any more of the turbidity sensors that are on all of the existing DRWI stations now, because the hardware that was in there was discontinued. So they've been trying to develop a sensor for a number of years and had their own technical and time feed issues. So they finally released this just a few months ago. It's called the Clary View 10, and it's an optical turbidity sensor. And we bought one, and I've got it here, and actually got it right back here. And it seems to work great. As far as we can tell, works great with the Mayfly. So we'll be doing some in situ tests with that and comparing that to the Yosemite sensor and our existing sensors, plus a few other turbidity measuring devices we have. And we'll be giving you more feedback about which one we would recommend and which one we'll be rolling out to replace people who have had a damaged turbidity sensor for any of the other ones. So these are both, I think we've had a lot of questions over the last couple of years of when are we going to get a new cell board and what's the status with turbidity? And this at least lets you know that we're working on it and we're very close, and we've got everything here for the new sensors, and the cell phone stuff's been resolved. So where do you go to buy one of these? So if you wanted one, if you're part of the DRWI program, I think most of the replacements and repairs are usually covered, unless it's excessive and we've had to replace too many things too many times, and then we have to work with you to figure out who's going to pay for various parts and all. But if you're inclined to build one of these things on your own, or a whole bunch of other ones to fill out your sensor network, we sell all of these things that I just mentioned in our EnviroDIY shop page. and we sell them in bulk there in quantities of 5. So because it's not easy for us to just sell 1 or 2 little small pieces here and there. So we sell them directly from us in 5 or 10 or 15 packs. And on our website, we've got a number of pages there where you can click and read all about them and all that. And then we do still sell single quantity items on Amazon, but right now most of them are out of stock because we've been waiting for after the Christmas rush and all of the new products came in so that we could restock Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and you search, you're not going to find anything right now, but the items are still there. They just, Amazon doesn't show them in the search listing unless it's actually in stock. So we'll be updating all of that here very soon with those items. So single items will still be available on Amazon. 5 packs are always on our shop. And I think that's about it. So those are the main points I wanted to make. There's all sorts of, high-tech stuff I could go into, but I know most of you probably don't want to know that, but we just figured for the last year, a lot of folks have said, what's the deal with cell boards and what's going on with sensor development, and even for a while there, we ran out of mayfly boards. When we ran out of the 0.5s, we got the new 1.0s right at the same week that we put out the last bunch of the old boards. So we totally ran out of mayfly boards and couldn't even replace anything else till the new ones came in. So it was cutting it really close there, but we're doing great now with inventory and we're fully stocked with everything that we need. But it's been a rough couple of years just trying to get things ordered and in stock and trying to keep everything functional. So that's why we haven't been able to give us super detailed answers whenever in some of these monthly meetings when people said, when are you going to have something? Because even I didn't know. We would order something and it'd get back ordered or I'd have to redesign, and it's been a constantly moving target. And everything finally came together a couple of months ago so that we were able to fully stock it and get everything tested and deployed. And I think the majority of DRWI stations that were having trouble have been upgraded, as Dave said earlier. Rachel and Steve have been out to almost 50 stations here in the last 3 months, replacing any of the ones that had troubled mayflies or troubled cell boards. So at this point, there's just random ones that are kind of dropping off here and there, and we'll be going to visit those and upgrading those with the new cell boards and mayflies and getting everything back online. So at some point in the next year, probably every station will have all of this new hardware. But some of them are still working fine, so we're not replacing them just yet. So if you happen to visit your station and you see you have old stuff, don't worry. If it's working fine, there's no reason to replace it. It's just when one of the things fails, you get an upgrade, and we'll come out and do that. So that's kind of our plan for right now. So we can be in touch with any of you who do seem to have dying boards or technical issues or seem to need a quicker response on replacing stuff if we don't seem to catch it in time.
Hey,
So
Shannon.
there's a couple of questions in the
Yes.
chat. Yeah, does anybody have anything? I'm going to read them while, if anybody else wants to talk. Jim, you got a question?
Yeah, a question on,
Oh,
You got muted again.
push the wrong. I tried to, the software won't compile on my PIO.
I saw your
up on-
question about that, and yeah, I thought Sarah was going to answer it, but it looks like she's not available right now. I'll answer you on the forum of how to do that, but I have some ideas of how I think it might how it might what your solution might be, but I don't want to bore everybody else in the room with too much code talk. So I can answer that on the forum, but I think it's a pretty simple solution. So.
Okay, well, it's more of a general question. If I have similar problems, it's best to put it on the forum or email Sarah.
Well, no, I think it's best to put it on the forum. I just thought Sarah she's out of commission or out of communication right now. So I try not to, basically with the Stroud stuff and EnviroDIY, if it's a hardware question, it comes to me. If it's a software question, I let Sarah answer that on the forum. And so usually she's quick to respond. So I saw your question, but I was going to wait and see if she could tackle it so that I didn't step into her territory. But since it looks like she's not going to get to it for a little bit, I will answer that. So, but we really do prefer any sort of technical questions to come to the forum if it's a general thing like that. But for those of you DRWI people who are part of this group, if something breaks, don't go to the forum and say, hey, my station broke, come out and fix it, because then everybody else in the world who is not DRWI thinks that we're free tech support and they want us to come visit them and go to their house or go to their station and do stuff, which the DRWI group is very special in that, you know, Rachel and Steve's time and mileage and hardware and all is covered by the grant so that we're able to support you guys. But the rest of the world, if they have a question, we ask them to put it on the forum so that it's a great teaching tool that if I answer it there, then the rest of the people can see it and fix things themselves. But yeah, if it's, Jim, for you, since if it's a super technical question and it's really specific and doesn't apply to anyone else, then yeah, I think you've emailed those directly to us before. But for a question like, it seems like that's something that other folks might have a problem with, and we answer it for you on the forum, then that becomes a great teaching moment for everyone else. So if they have the same problem, they can go, oh, this guy had this problem, here's how to solve it. So it's a great question for you to ask on the forum. And I will, I think my solution with hoping it works for you would be great, because it should help everyone else who might encounter that same issue. So.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I do have another general question. I bought 5 of those boards, and of course, a little frustrating. I can't use them because the damn software hangs, but I'm sure we can fix that. But the GPS feature, is that going to be implemented? Because I move my stations around. I have a bunch of these Lex stations I designed. If I move them around my marsh, it would be great to be able to know where the heck they are.
Yeah, it wasn't a feature that, you know, we actually built. I've got one here. This is we used to have this thing here. This is a GPS bead. So if you put this on your Mayfly, the Mayfly always knows where it is, but it's a GPS only. So there was no way to do cellular and GPS at the same time. So we used to build those where you could walk around and take data, you know, with a handheld reading, and then it would geotag the data, so you get the data in a file with latitude, longitude, and sample reading. But to be able to transmit it, then it took an extra hardware and all this other stuff. So when I was redesigning this cell board, and I found this cell chip that actually has GPS stuff built into it. So if you just add an antenna, it does require a couple extra lines of code, and it doesn't do cellular at the exact same time as the GPS. You have to turn them off in the code for a second, switch, you know, because there's basically 2 different radios in there. So you take your location reading, turn off the GPS, turn on the cell board, and then transmit the data. But yeah, it works fine that way. You can also use it for setting the clock, because the GPS there can get the time from the GPS constellation in order to set the real-time clock on the Mayfly. But at that point, you've also got a cell board. You might as well just connect to the time.gov time server and get the timestamp that way. So it's just one of those, there's multiple ways to do things, and we don't have a real need to transmit geolocation with the Mayflies the way we currently have the DRWI code. So we haven't implemented that, but I think we've done enough testing. Sarah's done a lot of examples. Maybe she'll be able to share some, but it uses the tiny GPS library with tinygps.h. And you just talk to the chip and ask the location, and you get latitude and longitude and elevation, and then it's up to you what you do with that. And you just you'd have to change the sketch that you currently use in your logger to just treat it as another sensor, because you're asking your water sensor for depth, you're asking your turbidity for its value. You might as well just ask the GPS what's your location and get that, and then build that into the code to transmit that to monitor my watershed. I don't believe monitor is set up to receive lat long, but those are 2 parameters that we could add so that folks could add that. But it would be handy, because every once in a while, one of our stations decides to walk away and just not be there the next time we go out. And they usually tend to be turned offline at that same time, but sometimes you can actually see a station will be online for 5 or 10 minutes after the water sensors have been like cut off or removed or whatever. So someone probably, you know, cuts off the cables, takes the station to their car and messes with it until they get the lock open or whatever. And in this case, you might actually get a couple of pings of the location to find out where they went before they open it. But most of the time, the station tends to go offline at the same time that the sensor data stops, because I think people break it open or, you know, do whatever they're going to do right there in the field. But there is a potential that you could have your station be smart enough to send its location with each transmission. And then if someone steals it, you get the location of the thief's house as he's using the data logger in his living room. I don't know. So the other idea is, we've had people who are building drifters or devices that are going to float down a river and collect data, or you could put one of these in your car and collect temperature or air quality or whatever as you go, and also be getting the location while you're there. So it gives people a lot of potential, but we're not going to implement it just for the DRWI code, but it's there and it's in the chip and people can use it if they want. So we're hoping folks develop that and then share it back with the community. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Mike Bullard, I just answered your question regarding the cell boards. They are compatible with the old mayflies, but generally Shannon and Rachel are replacing the mayflies while they're at it because it's just better.
Yeah, the new boards work with the old ones. They do tend to, or they don't tend, but there's a few occasions where the new cell boards have kind of locked up a little and just needed to be reset. And because the old mayfly, there's only one chip that powers everything on the mayfly, including the sensors and the cell board and everything. There's just one chip where it's like a power chip that generates the voltage. And the new mayfly has 3 different power chip voltages. One is just for the mayfly and its brain. The other one is for the radio transmitter. And the third one is just to power the sensors. So it's a little more, it's like having 3 engines in one car rather than one engine doing it. So the mayfly is a lot more powerful and can power the cell board a little better because it's got its own independent power source for that. So you can try putting the new cell board on an existing mayfly. There are sketches online. There's only 1 or 2 lines of code that you need to change, and there's a note in there on GitHub if you download the latest file to work with these new cell boards, that you just change 1 or 2 lines depending on which version of the mayfly you're using. But yeah, we found the new boards to be slightly more reliable, but and most of the time these boards have been out for 3 or 4 years, and sometimes they get some corrosion on them or some moisture, or sometimes the switch gets a little bit crusty and doesn't work all the way or something. So we've just found that it's for us also, it's easier to program a new board in the office and then take a pre-programmed board to the field, just swap them out and then go home, instead of standing there with a laptop and spending 5 minutes uploading the file and changing it that way. So it's a little easier to just do them in bulk with a brand new board. So
Great.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
We are having folks drop off here and we are past 3:30.
yeah, we're up to 3:30.
So just as a closing message, I think we had quite a few new folks today. So any new people, if you could email me and just let me know who you are, who you're with, if you haven't already communicated with Rachel about this, and I can add you to the email distribution list. We want to make sure that we're communicating with everyone as much as possible and keeping everyone in the loop. So just email me, that is, if you haven't already communicated with Rachel during the meeting, and we'll add you to the distribution list. So I'm going to stop recording now.